Hi, I'm Donna and this is Charlotte. We're from Pimms Needles. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you with Point North. They're supporting our project, which is called Bloom in Life.
And it's through a fund called Enriching Later Lives. And it's all about providing information for women in midlife to help navigate really difficult situations and kind of facilitate positive change.
Hi there. This morning we're joined by Nicola from NicolaFarndell, Menopause Specialist. So Nicola, do you want to chat to us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's lovely to be here. And it's such a great little setup.
Welcome.
Really like it. Yeah.
It's lovely for you to join us.
So I've had Lifenow Coaching for almost 5 years actually, when we're recording this. I set it up in 2021 and I support women to rebuild confidence, to build self-trust, empowerment, strength that they can thrive, not just through menopause, but through their entire life. And I work across coaching, training, consulting. So I support individual women who might want to come and work with me themselves. But most of the work that I do at the moment is corporate. So I support organisations to really understand what women's health means to their usual EDI kind of structure, and to kind of shift it away from well-being as well, because menopause, as I'm sure we'll dive into, is about so much more than just thinking of it in that typical wellness sense and trying to kind of survive it. So I want organisations to really embed it into their strategy and culture so that all of their team, because I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this as well, how it isn't just women who are impacted by menopause and those midlife changes. So yeah, I set the business up after leaving corporate. I was made redundant from Nike. I was based here in the Northeast. I'd worked at Nike for 20 years and we went through a huge global restructure in the midst of the pandemic. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because I was 45. I was really struggling with my own confidence and general sense of self-worth and really doubted being able to do anything else. And so it came as a huge shock. And initially I was petrified, but I'd started to change a few things in my overall well-being in life in kind of the 2 or 3 years leading up to that. And I had something happen that had never happened before, because I was someone who would see the cup as being half empty and go straight to the negative and worry and catastrophize. And instead I thought, maybe this is meant to be, because I think like many people in the pandemic, I felt like the fragility of life really hit home. I'd lost my mum quite suddenly as well before the pandemic, just a few months before it started. She was only in her late 60s and it happened quite suddenly. And so I just thought something has to change for me as well, because I'd seen what happened to her, saw what happened to lots of people in the pandemic, and realised how much I was struggling working at home during lockdown and didn't know what I was going to change, how I was going to make life different. So when that redundancy happened, although initially I thought, what am I going to do? I was the main breadwinner, or the main earner, breadwinner in my family, and just felt scared, but then had this kind of little spark of, what if this is meant to be? What if now is the time? Because I've struggled for what might be more than half of my life. I'm 45. Like, I know I can't continue like this, because I think I could end up in a really unhealthy place. And yeah, that kind of little spark ignited something which led to investing in some work on myself to build some self-worth and overcome the self-doubt that I had. And that was incredible and put me into a world that I didn't know existed online, and discovered all of these self-employed women and people that called themselves entrepreneurs, who I thought that title belonged to someone like Richard Branson, maybe. Yeah, and it just all evolved from there, that I decided what I was really passionate about was the health of women. But that was kind of my vision, because I want girls to grow up healthier. I've got a daughter who's 18. And yeah, those things just all came together, and over a few months evolved into this idea to begin a health and wellness coaching business. And that's grown and shifted and changed to where it is right now over the past few years.
It's really interesting because we've just done another podcast and it was with a beekeeper, and he was just saying how his life changed in lockdown and in the pandemic, exactly as you were just saying there, how that really changed his mindset. And he thought, I've been doing this career for years. I don't want to do that anymore. Is it bringing me joy? And he said exactly the same thing. So I just think it's so interesting how many people you meet who've changed direction completely, and it's really changed their mindset in that period of time. So,
and I think it's fascinating hearing you talk about having self-doubt, because we've met you a couple of times now, and you'll be the last person in the world that we'd ever think would doubt anything, because you just come across so like confident and focused. And is that something that you've sort of learned the tools along the way to be able to do?
Absolutely. I would say I was quite a confident child. I used to do drama, performing arts. I really wanted to act. That didn't happen. Like a lot of teenagers, other things came into play, and yeah, kind of didn't pursue that path. And like I said, I wouldn't say I was overly confident, but I had a lot of self-assurance and I was very determined to travel. I grew up with a dad who told a lot of stories about travelling in the Navy. And when I was 19, I got a job with Virgin Atlantic as cabin crew. Awesome. But prior to that, I was 21 then. When I was 19, I went to the US to work as an au pair for the summer. And that changed everything for me, because I came back just feeling really different. For a long time, had this sense of not fitting in, of being different. I'd had some bullying when I was a child. Just different things play out that meant I did carry this sense of like worry and not feeling as normal as everyone else. And I think doing that experience in the US, while my friends started to get jobs post-college and boyfriends and get engaged even, I came back and just didn't know where my place was. I'd gone to university. I was the only one in my group who did. And quite quickly after coming back from America, I had my first huge panic attack, which really shifted everything for a very long time, even how I am now and how I feel today. That began a real downward turn in my mental health, and confidence was then impacted on the back of that. And honestly, I was struggling to survive. Like I went to university, but I really struggled to go into lectures and seminars. I'd often have panic attacks. Some were less severe. Some meant I ended up in A&E. Once I was even taken there in an ambulance. But all of this struggle that I had with my mental health began impacting my physical health, but very, very quickly impacted my self-worth and self-esteem. And I completely believed that I was a freak, that I was flawed, that there was something fundamentally wrong with who I was. And although I got then that job with Virgin, I gave that up very quickly after about 13, 14 months, because I just didn't trust myself to be on that jumbo jet flying across the Atlantic, 35,000 feet high, because I would constantly have this feeling of fear and anxiety. It took until I was in my early 30s to get a diagnosis. When I first sought help medically in 1995, when this all started, I was just kind of dismissed by the doctor, and he used to say, "Oh, are you having one of your funny turns again?" And really condescending and very much, I think, the experience that lots of women have had. I believed I needed to fix what was wrong with me, and although I then went into corporate after working at Virgin, I got a job for another airline and worked in sales and marketing for a few years, then started at Nike. I built a pretty decent career, but throughout that, I had zero confidence. And I think on the outside, it looked like I was confident. I certainly didn't put myself forward to speak up, to present. I really couldn't. Like what you've seen me do and what I'm capable of now, like that was so far away from where I was able to perform and even what I wanted to be able to get to and achieve. Like I just wanted to be able to go into a meeting room and have someone start to speak at the front, and for me to sit there calm and not believe I was going to die and freak out and let everyone see what an absolute weirdo I was. That was what I wanted. I didn't even dream beyond that to be someone who could publicly speak. That was something I'd be like, oh, I wish I was that person, but that's off the agenda. I'm so far away from that. Can I just please like be calm and not shake and not have this constant irrational fear arise in situations, you know, even in a room like this. That's how I would have felt. So yeah, I mean, I just thought for all of the years that I worked and was trying to not be found out and lose my job, I just tried to build skills and to fix what I thought was mentally wrong or physically wrong with my brain. I thought there was something wrong. And by going to the doctor, trying medications, having MRI scans, you know, just seeking out solutions, including things that were not medically conventional. I did try lots of things like hypnotherapy, Reiki, which wasn't even called Reiki back then. I used to go to a spiritual church. I read. I did all of this stuff because I was so desperate really to just survive, because I was so frightened of dying and I really believed I was going to die with what I was experiencing. And throughout, which brought me up to that time in the pandemic when I was made redundant, you know, that was 26 years of really becoming an expert in mental health and general well-being. I didn't know I was doing that, and that's why that came into the kind of the mix and conversation when I started to think about what I would do beyond Nike after the redundancy. But I knew the starting place, even before I knew I was going to set up a business and I just thought about getting another job, was I have to build some confidence, because I was petrified sitting in my home office in the lockdown, you know, with my slippers on, in my home, comfortable, my daughter being homeschooled in the room next door. I was still having quite extreme feelings of panic and anxiety, and, you know, just sitting on a screen in the comfort of my own home, and I knew something had to change. So when I then was confronted with potentially having to find another job, I thought, God, I've got to do something, because I did really lack confidence. And that started a journey of building that, which I then realised I'd been going about it for completely the wrong way for 26 years.
So what did you do that changed that then? What did you have? Did you have therapy? Did you to shift that? And do you still suffer from panic attacks, or do you think that's all really calmed down now?
I do still experience panic and anxiety, yeah, different. I've got more tools now to cope with that. I mean, I did have to build tools from the age of 19. The first tool I ever had was a paper bag. I used to carry a paper bag everywhere and breathe in and out, because that was pretty much the only advice I ever got given back then. And I did build subsequent tools to help me survive, basically, and try and like not go into full-blown panic. But I've then built on that, you know, considerably better than what I had up to that point 5 years ago. The first thing I did was invested in a programme to work with two amazing coaches who are also based here in the Northeast. Donna and Cheryl run Now Is Your Time. I paid to do a programme with them. I'd never invested in anything like that. Yeah, I'd read, I'd listened, I'd watched people, I'd, you know, tried to go to talks and find information out. But I think a big shift was not having to go to work. And I think, well, I know, in fact, I say this with a lot of women who I work with or speak to in my community. When you are just so busy in life, you are caught up in that, I call it like that spin cycle. You've got to keep going. You've got to go to work every day. You've got to run your home. You've got to look after the kids and maybe care for others as well in your family and so on. Like, when you're in that situation, it can be really hard to focus on the right things that are going to shift the needle with how you feel in whatever way that might be for you. And with me, that confidence, that self-belief and self-worth, like having that space, not having to go to work and almost have like the pressure cooker valve taken off, that meant I was like, oh, I call it almost like a get out of jail free card. It wasn't, because I knew I had to earn money. Yeah. I did have to find something eventually. But at that moment in time, I had breathing space for the first time in a way I'd never experienced. You know, I did get a financial payoff as a redundancy package. I'd been there 20 years. So I had, you know, that freedom of not having to go to work and a bit of financial stability to support investing in something, which was a self-led program. So it wasn't, you know, a huge supportive one-to-one kind of program. It was something, you know, because I was petrified of spending, I think it was about £1,000 back then. Seemed like a huge amount of money, but it was self-led, it was online, there was support calls, and that really shifted things very, very quickly, which I was amazed at. But I also think it wasn't just the program, it was that I'd come to a fork in the road during the pandemic that made me realise like I had to change. Losing my mum, the pandemic itself, I had a really bad accident in the pandemic. I had to get a metal plate put in my wrist. I was out walking in the woods, had a huge fall, knocked myself out. I ended up in hospital. That was a real wake-up call, just that stress and anxiety working from home. I also read a book which had a huge impact on me, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. So I had like all of these little parts come together that made something start to shift in me that was like, now is the time.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that's Donald Chow's business name, but I'd already made that decision. So I think anyone could buy a program like that, but unless you really know why you want to change. And that became one of the kind of foundational pieces of the framework I've built in my business, that why. I think it was the right time. I'd realised and decided I'm going to change, because if I don't, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. And so, it was a lot of, beyond that one programme, a lot of other personal growth things. A lot was self-led sort of thing with what you can get free online, or, podcasts, YouTube, books, all kinds of things, meeting different people. So I changed lots of different things to help build that.
There's so many women listening thinking, I'm in exactly that same boat right now. I know my best friend at the moment, she's just took redundancy and her son's autistic and she's wanting to just spend more time with him. And I think sometimes with the redundancy situation, it is like a catalyst as well, isn't it? To just going, right, okay, this is it. You're sort of forced into that situation, but actually what's come out of it, especially for you, is something completely positive and a total shift in your life.
Yeah, and it's sad though and wrong that we need a way for something to be like something to force us into that. And that's now part of what I talk about and try to spread in my messaging, is not to wait to, hit rock bottom, not to wait for something to force you, because so many women reach this midlife crossroads point. And sometimes it's menopause impacted, sometimes it's not menopause, it's just that you're at that age and you realise where you are in your life. 50 can be a big milestone. I've just hit that very recently. I think for lots of women, they hit that and go, oh, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'm 50 already and I'm not happy in my marriage or my career or in the friendship groups or financially or, my confidence or my health. And sometimes it's something like that which triggers that. Sometimes it's forced on you, like your partner asking for separation or divorce or a redundancy or something with your own health, like really, shocking you into knowing that you have to change something.
So for anyone that's listening, you mentioned menopause there. What is menopause?
Good question.
Big question.
Big one,
question.
So I think about menopause as an umbrella that really sits over what we call perimenopause, menopause itself, and postmenopause. But menopause in itself is just one day. It's one day that marks 12 months since your last menstrual bleed. That's what it is. If I think back to my mum when she went through menopause, it was that term, I'm going through menopause. I'm going through it and I'm going to get out to the other side. But there isn't really another side, because once you've hit that 1 day marker, that is the anniversary of your 12-month gap since that last period, you are post-menopause for the rest of your life. That's it. Your hormones have reduced, and that's essentially what menopause is about. It's about the eggs that we're born with as a female and that we have in our ovaries, which are there when we're in our mother's uterus in the womb. We have the follicles there growing in our ovaries to become eggs. They decline from actual growth in the womb and then from birth all of the way through our lives. They're significantly reduced by the time we hit puberty, and then we go through our reproductive years where we have the egg supply and we could, if we wanted to, fall pregnant and carry a baby. And perimenopause is then when those egg supplies have begun to decline in number and quality. And that really triggers the hormonal changes that we now hear so much about, which we think of as this umbrella term menopause. So menopause as a whole is really those hormones changing. And when we talk about hormones in this sense, we're talking about estrogen, progesterone primarily, the two that fluctuate a lot and are declining through that perimenopause season of life. But testosterone as well can fall, but that doesn't fluctuate in quite the same way for most women anyway. So it's really about us no longer being able to reproduce. And that's why typically, historically, menopause has been categorised and thought of, especially in the health sense, as a woman simply not being able to have a baby anymore. It's all linked to our, reproductive part of our biology and, isolated in that sense. But actually it is a lot bigger than that and impacts a lot more. So that's what it is, simplified, menopause itself is that 1 day marker. It's when we no longer have an egg supply and we aren't producing the associated amounts of estrogen and progesterone from our ovaries, and we, wouldn't be able to fall pregnant anymore.
So I know when I've mentioned it to my mum, I said, I think I'm perimenopausal. She says, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, perimenopausal is a new word. It wasn't around for now. You're either in it or you're not. So, when you were saying that people say, I'm menopausal, do you think that was, you'd say you were menopausal when you were actually perimenopausal, and then that was the old term, if you like?
Maybe, but I think a lot of women would have felt the perimenopausal symptoms, but not attached it to menopause, because really until very recently, and I mean recently in probably the last 5 years or so, we have only thought about menopause symptom-wise being around the time that your periods, your menstrual bleed each month, if you have that, start to change or you miss them. And so I think probably the majority of women going back certainly 20, 30 years more, even like say 10 years or more, probably didn't realise any symptoms they were having were perimenopause. There might have been women who had changes to their periods quite early in that perimenopause season and were experiencing things, and so would have put a menopause label. But I think hot flushes and period changes were the two things that really told a woman she was menopausal.
And are they the most common symptoms?
No.
Then?
And that's the irony of it all. Oh, it's so sad, isn't it, to think like, mums, grandmothers, nanas, and even women still here today in our country, but certainly in lots of other countries, who are at different stages in understanding menopause and what it means and so on. Yeah, they just thought it was, I'd say definitely the hot flushes, stopping your periods or missing periods, moodiness. I think, the anger, that's obviously been the butt of many jokes and comedians have used that for years. And weight gain, I think, and possibly, again, I think there was a comedy element to this, was women losing the libido, not having a sex drive or very low sex drive. But yeah, today they are the main symptoms. The main symptoms are the cognitive symptoms, but especially the more emotional side of what can change. And that's linked to those cognitive, those brain changes. Anxiety is the leading symptom that's been reported in some of the biggest UK studies that have been done in the last couple of years. Whereas hot flushes and night sweats, I think, take 16th, 17th places together. Whereas anxiety, depression are the first 1 and 2.
I was chatting to my friend about it actually last week, and we were kind of saying, as obviously generations have gone on, probably when you were hitting the menopause, your children were much older, they'd perhaps left home, maybe you didn't work, maybe you looked after the home. I think situations have changed very much. At our age, we've still got young children, we've got busy jobs, we're working full time, we're juggling all of those different things. And maybe that is, I don't know, do you think that is why maybe we do notice the cognitive symptoms like the brain fog and things like that, because we've still got such a load on our plate?
Well, we're juggling that much, aren't we? I think with just the way that we live our lives now, you've got 20 plates to spin and probably instead of 5 that we used to have before. So
yeah, I definitely think that, there's 2 parts to it, I think. and know from everything that I've studied and researched. One is exactly that. Our lives are totally different to what our mothers' lives were like. And I'm not saying necessarily, that our lives are harder. And I'm sure, my mum's not here, so I can't have this discussion or argument with that. And I've heard lots of women talk about this, that their mum will say, oh, it was much harder in my day, much harder than what you've got. You've got it easy, you've got all of these gadgets and I don't know, the microwave and whatever it might be, and you get to go on holidays and you get to work, you get to work. And actually a lot of women back then weren't able to work because of cultural, structures. It wasn't encouraged to be a woman with a career as such. So I'm not saying that it's harder today, but I do think our lives are much busier. And you're right, lots of women are having children much later in life. We're what's called the sandwich generation, that many women are going into perimenopause or even becoming menopausal, postmenopause, whilst they've still got children in primary school. Their children are not even teenagers, and at the same time, they're caring for elderly parents. So they're sandwiched between their children and their parents and have a lot of caring responsibilities. And most women do work, and work isn't typically 9 to 5. Women are doing shifts, women are doing roles. When I worked, most days I'd be in the office by 8:30. I might not leave till 6:30. I was in London most weeks, some weeks 3 or 4 days. A lot of women have a job that's very much like that. So I think, our lifestyle in that sense is a huge contributing factor to the way we experience symptoms today. But the other side, and I think this is even greater of an impact and certainly being proven in some of the newer studies that are coming out, is our lifestyle from a health perspective has declined. What we eat, how we move, certainly the way we think and what we're experiencing from a mental health avenue, all of those things, drinking more alcohol, smoking, everything around the way we live. So yes, the load, if you like, from the way life is, but more importantly and more significantly is the way our lifestyle is contributing to not just the cognitive, but lots of other symptoms as well. But definitely when you're talking about cognitive, for anyone that might not be familiar with that term, that are things like what we might bucket as brain fog, but like memory retention, word recall, decision making, your executive function, being able to think and articulate and process information and retain information, all of those kinds of things.
Have you got any magic solutions to get
No.
that?
I don't have a magic wand. Well, I don't have a magic wand, but I do have, I would say, we'll call it the magic answer then.
Okay.
Habits.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to give you. So it isn't easy, because habits, whatever habit you want to break or put in as a new habit, I'm sure you'll know, aren't easy to do. But the answer is simple, like the approach is simple, so to speak, because the way you live, your actions, behaviours, the choices that you make every day do impact how you feel. And the great news is that it doesn't just impact you as you're in menopause. This is going to impact you for the rest of your life, because one of the big factors that we need to be more aware of and considered of as women, and the reason why I do what I do ultimately, is that our lifespan has extended massively over a very short amount of time. So from the 1900s, we've gone from living on average as a woman to age 50 to now 84, 86 is in the UK. But our health span has declined. And actually, for the first time in generations, children who were born, certainly in the last 10 or so years, are expected to actually have a declining lifespan. And that is, scary as a parent to think that your child might live less years because of how we are living in our lives, like this fast-paced, tech-led world can seem great and is great in many respects, but also has been very detrimental to our overall health. So as women, our health span, which is the number of years you're going to live healthy for, is considerably less than your lifespan. So if I said to you, you're going to live till you're 80, let's go for 84, what age would you expect to be healthy? And when I say healthy, I mean thinking for yourself, retaining information, getting yourself to the toilet, in and out of the shower or bath, walking to the shops, carrying your shops back to your car, being able to drive your car. How old do you think?
I'd love to say 80, but
I think we all would.
yeah.
Well, take 22 years off 84.
Wow.
Yeah. So by your early 60s, as a woman, I can't remember off the top of my head the stat, but I think it's something like 1 in 3 women will have a chronic illness or an autoimmune disease. We don't know this as women, so it's easy to just think, what do I fix now? Like, you know what you said, John, like, what's the magic answer to menopause? Because we don't want to experience those symptoms, because many of us are going to have to work until we're 67 or 68, if you're even younger than we are. And it might rise, you know, for girls today, they might be looking at 69, 70 by the time they're in the workplace. But, you know, we can think about just us like firefighting the symptoms today and ignore that actually what we should be doing is looking to our 80s, to our 70s, especially, and thinking, how can I be a strong, mobile, independent, fully functioning human when I'm that age? And so your habits today are basically, you know, the investment for your future, but they're also going to help you to feel better today. And the younger you are, when you begin to embed those healthy habits, the more you are going to move through any life season with ease, whether it's pregnancy, whether it's struggling with fertility, whether it's losing a parent, some other life event, redundancy, we've talked about divorce, but then menopause, you're going to navigate those with more ease, you know, with more resilience. And now, for the first time, there are studies starting to come out slowly, but that do show the positive impact on symptoms in menopause that your diet plays and exercise plays. And I think we will see more on the rest of your lifestyle, stress, sleep, and so on, because all of those things are going to mean that you are healthier when your hormones start to change, and so your body doesn't feel the shifts as much as someone who isn't as healthy. So yeah, the habits that you have, which really is under this umbrella of lifestyle medicine. You know, you can treat and support yourself and protect your future health through your lifestyle choices.
And do you categorise those habits, or do you have five good habits? Or tell us a little bit about that.
So I have a framework. I have what I call my reset method, which is all about reclaiming energy, strength, empowerment, and trust. And to do that is through your habits. And they sit under my 5 pillars of wellness, which are movement, nutrition, mindset, sleep, and stress. And mindset is in the middle. So if I drew them visually, I'd have 5 circles with mindset in the middle circle, and then I'd have 4 circles, and every one of those circles overlaps the other 4. So mindset in the middle, movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress. And it's looking at those 5 pillars and building habits across those 5. And mindset is at the middle because it's so, so important. And it's one area of health that as women we overlook, but is probably for many women a real challenge for them. There's so many stats on this, you know, around women who doubt themselves. We've obviously talked about this. Women who would describe their self-worth very low, their self-belief, who are running a narrative on a regular basis. Oh God, I'm so useless. I'm bloody stupid. I can't do this right, you know, or I'm not good enough because I'm not the size that all of these celebrities are that I see on social media. You know, all of that kind of stuff, like, oh, I have to do this. I need to do that. I should be better at this. I shouldn't be going to work and leaving my child in the nursery. I should be able to make my husband's tea every night. Whatever it might be for you.
Yeah.
That's,
all
you know.
All of them. That's everything.
So mindset really matters because that is kind of like the starting point to also help contribute to those habits in the other 4 pillars. So mindset could be starting with something as simple as an affirmation about you valuing yourself and valuing your health. And what's really important with affirmations is I hear people kind of thrown back an argument and trying to dismiss them with, well, how can I say that I'm a healthy woman? Because I'm not healthy today. I don't feel healthy. But you can put an affirmation together like, I am a woman who is building strong health. I am a woman who values her health and makes choices today for her future self. So you can say it in a way that is true today.
Yeah.
And it's not, putting a sticky plaster, this toxic positivity of, yeah, I'm healthy, when underneath your brain is telling you, but you're not healthy, you feel rubbish, you're struggling with this. So I'd suggest starting with something as simple as that. And a great way to begin a habit like that is when you very first wake up on a morning. So maybe you wake up in the morning and your first thought is, oh my God, I'm knackered. How am I going to get through today? I don't know. Is that something you experience maybe regularly?
Yeah.
That was certainly me for many, many years.
Especially on a Monday.
Yeah. And the way you think first thing in the morning really does set up your mindset and your energy for the rest of the day. So even if you catch that thought straight away, that's great. But then just reframe that and just thinking of, I am a woman who values her health. I'm a woman who's building strong health for our future self, that kind of thing. And just, then you can build on that. So I'm giving you what I call minimums, like a really simple starting place. And this is a good key to think of with building new habits as well. We have a tendency to go all out, like say it's about fitness or exercise, which I call movement. Someone might think, I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to lose weight. Or I'm going to build muscle, whatever that goal might be for you. And straight away, they're trying to build a habit of being a person who goes to the gym 4 times a week. And that's where we often fail because we can't change overnight. Yeah. And as humans, we're not designed to change. Our brain likes the status quo. So start with what I call a minimum and build. And it might seem boring, but boring becomes brilliant over time. And boring definitely becomes valuable and impactful over time. So just start small. So something like the affirmation for mindset. And then thinking about nutrition, could be just adding one thing. As women, many of us have struggled with our body image, perhaps with weight, and we think about restriction all of the time and going on a diet. So I would think about nutrition from a sense of what can I give myself that's going to help me have the healthiest, more balanced type of nutrition that does support strong health and well-being. And that could be adding a new fruit or vegetable. I think about this definitely from a point of view of fibre and diversity, but it could be healthy fats. Like you might not, when you look at it, bring very many healthy fats into your diet, or maybe you're not having good protein sources. So just maybe thinking about like one thing that you could just think, this week I'm going to have some avocado because I've never tried it and all I ever hear about is avocado on toast. Or maybe it's I'm going to actually put some seeds on my porridge this week. So just starting small again. Movement. Think about how you move through the day. So again, don't go, especially if you're someone that doesn't exercise and move their body very regularly right now, don't go to the extreme of, right, I'm going to do a Zumba class. If you want to do that and give it a try, fair enough. But my advice is, again, think about how you can bring more movement in through the day. So perhaps the minimum is, I'm going to walk for 5 minutes at some point today, and then looking at, is that after lunch, rather than eat your lunch at your desk and stay there for the next 4 hours and then end up literally trying to keep your eyelids open for a couple of those hours. Is it maybe the walk before you go into the office if you've parked your car and just take a little walk before you go in and start your day? Sleep, again, let's keep it really simple, but think about when you're going to bed, how are you setting yourself up for a good night's sleep? Because again, I've spoke to lots of women and worked with women whose bedtime routine is giving themselves time by going on social media because they've been so busy all day, and then they fall into bed at maybe 10:30. Pick up the phone. Yes, now I can scroll Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, maybe buy a few things. Then before they know it, it's 11:15 and they're like, oh my God, I've got to get up at 6 and I'm going to be knackered and so on. What is it you're doing to help yourself get to sleep? And what's one thing you, again, could add in is it maybe just 5 minutes without the phone before you switch the light off and put your head on the pillow and expect yourself to go to sleep? Is it perhaps a nice little bit of skincare routine? Is it playing some relaxing music or even a meditation, but just keeping it small? And then stress is a big one. Stress is what I call the maestro of the orchestra. Stress really is conducting our hormones in so many different ways, because of course we have lots of hormones, not just estrogen, progesterone and testosterone that we tend to think of around menopause. We need to be resilient, we need to look at how we respond to stress. So something small might just be, before you open your inbox in the morning, taking a few breaths, just bringing your nervous system into a regulated state. Perhaps there's a different point in your day where you feel that stress. Is it before you open the front door on a night and come in, before you pick the kids up maybe from school or whatever daycare they're at. And just thinking about perhaps that breathing as your little tool to begin with, and building a habit of that pause, taking a breath, grounding yourself. And then you can lay new things on top. Like in that example, you could begin to bring some mindfulness in, like you could be doing the breathing and then, think about how do I get more mindful, which is about being in the present and just, being exactly where you are, feeling whatever you're feeling in that moment. So you can really build on those minimums, and it's about repetition, consistency. It's not about willpower. Yeah, we need a bit of willpower to keep doing them, but it's about tools to help you to stay on track, maybe some accountability, some visibility, so you don't forget that you're supposed to be breathing a couple of times a day and that kind of thing. And then you can, gradually build these as habits through that consistent behaviour.
Yeah, and I mean, that's great, because I think that is, like you're saying, really taking accountability for it and starting from not the expectation being up here, but something more realistic that you can achieve and you can build on. What about how can our family and friends support us, just sort of thinking back to sort of the menopause stage, or even our employers, because there's so much more awareness around menopause. How could we ask for help, or what can they do to help us?
So I think there's two parts to this, especially when it comes to the workplace. I think it's easy, especially with what we have seen start to shift around this, to think companies must give support and companies must be helping you. Yes, absolutely. They need to, but it's not their sole responsibility, and it's not necessarily their responsibility to perhaps initiate a conversation around this, especially if you're struggling. And again, I've seen this play out where women think, well, my manager can see that I'm not normal, they should be saying something. We do need to advocate for ourselves. We need to take self-responsibility, but we don't need to be responsible for fixing everything ourselves. So I think that first bit of advice would be to take responsibility yourself, to know that you can initiate those conversations with your family, whether that's your partner, children, whoever else that might be in your wider family, friendship group even. And then likewise in the workplace is, we share that responsibility in both environments to support ourselves. So I think being open is really important. And this comes up a lot, especially around the topic of male allyship with menopause. Men are very nervous about bringing up the subject and knowing whether it's okay to talk about it. So let them know that it is okay. I'm not saying you have to be warts and all. We should never have to push ourselves into a corner and feel vulnerable and share something that we don't want to share. So feel safe, share what you're comfortable sharing. But even if it's something as simple as, there's a lot going on in the world of menopause right now, and I'm really interested in, because I feel like I'm at that season of life. Have you seen anything come up with what the company are doing to support this? It just could be that kind of thing. You don't have to sit there and go, oh my God, I'm having 3 hot flushes a day and I don't want sex with my husband. Like, we don't need to go into that. Some people might, fair enough, you be you. But, it's just bringing it to the forefront and normalising it. And I think also kind of the way I've talked about that is important, in that, like, I'm not saying we need to be, because there is a negative and difficult side for lots of women. The transition and change into menopause can significantly change their health and their self-worth and confidence. But we don't need to think that we should only talk about it if there's something negative and difficult happening. And we I think also have that responsibility to normalise it for our children, especially for girls. Although I know mothers who've only got boys and they're really interested in normalising it for them as well, because they're expecting that they're going to have a female partner or work with other females and, come across it in different ways in their future lives as well. So, I think it's important to not make it all doom and gloom either, and, help people to know that although there's a side to menopause which can mean women do struggle with symptoms and changes, it can be a time when women do feel more empowered and take control of their lives and change things, not just for their health, but in lots of other ways. And so I think it's, having those broader, open conversations around it.
And how do you, I know we haven't got long left, it's a big subject, but the HRT thing, how would you sort of suggest somebody approaches that if they were interested in going that way?
Yeah, this is a really big topic. We could do a podcast episode just on this
whole one on HRT.
It's such a big conversation. First of all, like I said earlier, there isn't a magic fix or cure for menopause. We're not going to cure it. We are going to go through it. And like I said, there isn't really another side, but we keep using that term. We're going to go through it. We're going to experience it and become postmenopausal. But HRT could be one of the tools. Habits, if you had a weighing scale, one of the old-fashioned, with the metal weights on each side, habits would definitely be heavier. They'd have a heavier load on. But HRT could be one of the tools that you use in your toolkit. My advice is be informed about what it is, how it works, and why you might need it. Do not assume whatever you've heard from anyone online, especially elderly people in your family, women, maybe even your doctor, sadly, because not all doctors are as well trained and informed as we need them to be. If you're someone that's had cancer, generally these, women would say, I'm not allowed HRT, or someone's had a blood clot, or their mother or grandmother's had cancer, breast cancer especially. Like, be informed yourself, get the right facts and information, know why it might help you and what it is you're looking to get from it, and seek the right advice. And I always suggest that women, if they really want to make sure they've got the right information, is to look at the NICE guidelines, NICE, which are guidelines that support how it's prescribed here in the UK. And, they understand what, when they go to their doctors, they need to be discussing around it. Because also, when someone seeks medical advice, they can often go in with all of these symptoms and changes they're experiencing and start the conversation with, I've got brain fog, I'm forgetting things, and I'm anxious, and I've put on weight, and I don't want sex, and I'm this and that. And then the doctor's like, whoa, one thing, 8 minutes, what is it? And then she's thrown off course and like, oh, it's the anxiety. And then, okay, you can have some antidepressants, or we'll give you some anxiety medication to try and support you. And she comes away and feels dismissed and not supported in the way she wanted. So the first step is be informed about HRT, but then also look at what actually you're experiencing, and going in with an approach of, I've had several changes or lots of changes, in category, or starting the conversation with a more clear approach and definition of, actually, there's been a lot of changes. And you don't even have to say what they are, because that might take you down that path of choosing one to discuss. But saying, there's lots of things which I believe, because of where I'm at my age and what I understand, are linked to being perimenopausal, and I would like to look at HRT as an option to support that. And HRT is very complex. Obviously, it's hormone replacement therapy. There are different types. The transdermal type that you put on your skin now, does have a lot of positive research around very, very, very limited, side effects and potential risks for most women. But again, some doctors are still prescribing the traditional oral type, which is what we call, systemic, and it's going to pass through your liver as well. And that is a chemically made, manufactured type of hormone versus the body identical, which are in the transdermal. So just like really inform yourself and look into it, but know that it has to combine with the lifestyle habits you have.
Yeah.
And what it can do for some women who are really struggling is it can open the door to feeling even slightly better, to begin changing your diet, to begin moving your body more, to begin thinking about how you can build perhaps some, confidence and change in your mindset and outlook and things like that.
So I think sleep's such a massive thing, isn't it? And I know I was experiencing like broken sleep for a while. And then I think when other things start happening, you wonder how much of that is magnetised by the fact that you're tired and you're not sleeping as well as you used to.
Yeah, so like I said with those 5 pillars, when you start improving one, they're going to improve the others. But the reverse happens when one isn't as good, it impacts the others negatively. So if you haven't slept well, and you know, this is scientifically proven, it's what happens in our physiological body. Our hormones change, so our hunger hormone increases and our satiety hormone, which is what keeps us or makes us feel full, declines. So we have almost a 50% change in our overall appetite. We all know when we're tired, we want to eat more and we generally crave carbs. But we also don't want to move our bodies, and we're probably less resilient and more responsive to a stressful situation, a bit more snappy maybe. The negative mindset can come into play, like, oh, I'm this, I feel this, and I'm fed up of this. And so they're all interlinked.
Definitely.
You know, and we can get in that downward spiral when one of them, especially sleep. I mean, sleep is a huge regulator in our bodily system. But the reverse is true as well with the upward spiral. You know, when you can shift one thing, that can positively impact all of the others. Movement can especially impact your sleep in a positive way.
It's such a big topic, and I think we could talk about this all day long. There's so many more questions, but I think what you're saying about that sort of multi-pronged attack, you know, the habits and taking that responsibility yourself, maybe looking at HRT, but being well informed, and also trying to engage, you know, family, friends, employers in a positive way. I think all of them things are hopefully going to make a big change to how successfully you get through it, or how easily you get through that kind of phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I see today with younger women is how interested they are in this, and they want to build those habits. That Gen Z woman is thinking about her health, and so she's interested. And I have organisations who are like, oh, our demographic's too young, or more male, or whatever. We only have a couple of women in menopause. Like, no. Like, these young women want to know this, because if you are 25 right now and you can build those habits across the 5 pillars I've shared, when you get to 45, like, you are going to be healthier. And we also want to retain our estrogen and progesterone naturally for as long as we can as well. So the healthier you are, the possibly higher chance you've got of, you know, going into perimenopause and then menopause a little bit older as well. So, you know, this is for everyone, and there's never a point when it's too late or you're too old. You can make positive changes, and, you know, if anything, think about your older self and protecting your bones and your muscles and your joints and your brain and your heart, because they're the things that actually kill us, as women. They're what we are at greater risk of with our health as women. So, you know, all of those healthy habits are going to really pay off long term.
And how do you support people and businesses then with your coaching?
Yeah, so right now I'm focusing primarily on working with organisations. I do have some women who come to work with me one-to-one. So I have a great programme called Midlife Reset and Rise, which is a really hands-on, lots of support, kind of 3-4 month type of programme that I take women through and help them build these habits to really help them to change. Because as I touched on, it's so, you know, it's easy to go, I'm going to build a habit of moving more. But in real life, that can be challenging. So really help them to work a lot on who they are and their identity to bring these habits into their lives and really build the identity they want. The work that I do with corporates is generally through training. I run things like manager and leadership training, talks. I sometimes put together podcasts built around this reset method that I have, that I mentioned, keynote talks. I'm speaking at a couple of conferences this month for different sectors rather than individual organisations. So yeah, lots of different ways. And of course now, thankfully, we have got some legal support coming into play with the Menopause Action Plan. So yeah, consulting with organisations to help them put the right plan together as well.
Amazing. We'll put your links to your websites and your socials in the comments.
Brilliant.
Do you want to just mention what it is?
Yeah, so lifenow.uk is the website. You can find out everything about me there. I'm on LinkedIn as NicolaFarndell and Instagram, Lifenow Coaching.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting. As I say, there's so much, such a big topic. We definitely could have talked for longer. We'll perhaps have to do another one.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.